Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com.
I'm Nina Cardona, and this is Nashville. This morning, for the first time in several years, the state of Tennessee carried out an execution. The man who died was named Oscar Smith. He was convicted in 1989 of killing his wife and two of her sons. He was pronounced dead at 10:47 today. Later in this hour, we will hear from a surviving member of that family, a man who is the son of both a victim of that crime and the son of the man who was convicted for and now executed for committing it. He's lived most of his life in that very difficult position of loss, grief, trauma, and very complicated feelings about what constitutes justice. But first, let's talk about the execution itself. Lawyers for death row inmates had asked for a reprieve while lawsuits against the state protocol are still moving through the courts. Governor Bill Lee denied that request on Tuesday. WPLN reporter Catherine Sweeney was in the viewing room of the execution chamber. This is Nashville's managing editor, Tasha A.F. Lemley, was outside in the crowds. And right now, criminal justice reporter Paige Pfleger is in the studio with me. Now, Paige, what have you heard from them so far?
So like you said, Oscar Smith was executed this morning by lethal injection. He was pronounced dead at 10:47. Inside the prison, witnesses for the execution said that Smith was strapped to a gurney covered in a sheet and his hands were taped down. His final statement took aim at the governor for not stopping these executions, and he talked a lot about how the justice system is broken. He said there were more men waiting to die at Riverbend, and he wasn't the first, and he will not be the last. There was a delay from the anticipated schedule, which is important to note. Sometimes delays are indicative of problems behind the scenes that we can't see. Witnesses said they could not see at what time the medication began to be administered to Smith. Knowing what time the protocol begins is important in order to determine how effective or potent the drugs are. There have been at least 9 lethal injections in the U.S. since 2020 that were botched, and that included failed attempts and prolonged deaths.
And I guess just to explain what was made clear from the witnesses, including Catherine, who was there, was that there is a line going into another room, and the executioner actually was behind a wall.
Exactly.
Completely out of view. So you couldn't see at all what was going into that line or when.
Exactly, yes. And so that makes it really difficult to make that determination of, we have an idea generally of how long it should take a person to stop breathing after the sedative has been administered. But because that was obscured, it's hard to say. And after the execution, family members of the victims spoke out, including the siblings of Judith Smith. Here's Terry Osborne.
The pain of losing Judy, Chad, and Jason is something that we will continue to carry. It's not a moment that goes by that we don't miss them. I miss the sound of Judy's voice. I know my brother does as well. On the other end of the phone, we miss the excitement of planning Chad's driving lessons, and we miss the pure joy of hearing Jason's laughter. These are memories and wounds that will never fully heal.
And it is always so important to hear those memories of the victims in a crime like this. This morning, protesters gathered outside Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in West Nashville, which is where the execution took place. Tasha Lemley was there with them. Now, can you tell me more about what you've heard from Tasha and what she was hearing on the ground?
So on the ground, protesters were divided into 2 camps at the security checkpoint. There were people who were for the death penalty and those against it. In the against the death penalty camp, Tasha talked to several people, many of whom cited their faith as a reason for being against the death penalty. Here's John Lozier. He's a prominent advocate for unhoused people here in Nashville.
My sign says, Bill Lee could stop this unholy murder. I'd like to see the governor act on my understanding of Christian faith.
Another protester, Alex Sager, told Tasha that she thinks carrying out the death penalty is hypocritical when we compare it to another stance that we often hear here in Tennessee.
everything about the death penalty is against the sanctity of life. It's not pro-life, whatever that word means, whatever that phrase means. So especially in the South where that phrase is used a lot, this feels like, okay, so why isn't this also an issue? Is this pro-life?
There were dozens of people in the against death penalty camp, but there was only one man standing in the pro-death penalty part of the grass outside the prison.
And just to be clear, the governor could have stopped this execution. He did that back in 22, but on Tuesday, he denied that push. So the state has changed its lethal injection protocol several times since 2000. That's when lethal injection became the main method of execution here. How was today's execution carried out? At least what we know of how it was carried out.
Yeah, so today's execution used a single drug. It's a sedative called pentobarbital. When Smith's execution was halted back in 2020, he was, well, and in 2022, sorry. Back in 2022, he was slated to have the 3-drug protocol. But sourcing for execution drugs, whether or not it's the 3-drug or the single drug protocol, has been a massive problem for Tennessee and other states across the country, forcing governments to turn to gray markets or to compounding pharmacies, which are often less regulated than getting them from manufacturers. But manufacturers have refused in recent years to supply any drugs for executions, mainly because they want their drugs to be associated with health, not death.
And this is the first execution since 2020. It's the first lethal injection since 2019. Can you walk me through that delay? I mean, what has been happening in the last few years?
Oscar Smith has been scheduled to be executed multiple times. So in 2020, the governor issued a pause on execution because of the coronavirus pandemic. In 2021, Smith was scheduled to be executed again, but it was pushed back once more. And Governor Lee that year directed the Tennessee Department of Correction to revise their lethal injection protocol. And 2022 was probably the most dramatic pause where Smith was scheduled to be executed and Governor Bill Lee halted the execution just an hour before it was scheduled to take place. The governor's office said at the time that it was discovered that the medication doses that were going to be used in that execution hadn't gone through all the quality tests that are required. He called for an independent review of the process and for staffing changes at TDOC. Former U.S. Attorney Ed Stanton was brought in to lead this big third-party review of the state's lethal injection protocol, and he found that lethal injections in the last few years had not been tested for endotoxins, and sometimes they failed or were not subjected to potency tests. And as we mentioned before, the potency of the drug is important when it's an important factor when we're thinking about suffering. Since then, all of these kind of moving pieces, the department has been revising its protocols, and Oscar Smith is the first execution we've had in many years.
So what does this mean moving forward? What's coming up in Tennessee?
So like Oscar Smith said in his final words, there are more executions coming. This marks executions resuming in the state of Tennessee. There are 2 more death warrants that have been signed for 2025, and there are still legal challenges ongoing. So that lawsuit that you mentioned before, where lawyers had asked for a reprieve for Smith until that lawsuit came to a conclusion, that lawsuit is still ongoing on behalf of folks who are on death row here in the state.
So again, what has happened today is that Tennessee has carried out its first execution since 2020, its first lethal injection since 2019. The man who died was Oscar Smith, and he was pronounced dead at 10:47 today in an execution that began a little bit late as far as the witnesses were able to see. We still don't know what caused the delay. We do not know when the medication was begun to begin the lethal injection. But again, we did have a witness from WPLN News, Catherine Sweeney, there at the execution chamber as that happened today.
And I think there are going to be more questions about the process. You know, since this is the first one we've seen in a while, as we said, there are so many elements of the protocol that are shrouded in secrecy, and information about where the drugs came from, how they were procured, the testing of those drugs. I think these are all questions that will be kind of asked in the coming days and weeks. I know that we will be continuing to look into Tennessee's execution protocol moving forward.
Well, thank you very much, Paige.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When we come back, we'll hear from This Is Nashville managing editor Tasha A.F. Lemley, who recently sat down with one of Oscar Smith's sons last week. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP, and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org. Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Nobody Trashes Tennessee, the state of Tennessee's official litter prevention campaign, managed by TDOT. Details on how to be part of the solution to end littering at nobodytrashestennessee.com.
I'm Nina Cardona, and this is Nashville. If you're just tuning in today, we are talking about Tennessee resuming execution of death row inmates. Oscar Smith was executed this morning. That was scheduled for 10 a.m., and we got confirmation of his death shortly before 11. Last week, This Is Nashville managing editor Tasha A.F. Lemley met with Casey Smith, one of Oscar Smith's twin sons, at a halfway house south of Nashville to hear about his experience related to his dad's crime and punishment. Casey was 2 years old when he lost his mother and both of his half-brothers in the 1989 crime leading to his dad's conviction. Let's take a listen.
Casey, why are we here talking today?
Because my dad's scheduled to be executed. I'm hoping that this can give a different perspective than what most news media outlets are doing right now. Everyone seems really thrilled and really excited by hearing about someone scheduled to be executed, but no one really talks about the impact that it has on the people that survived the incidents that led up to it, or how it impacted anybody, really. Just the fact that someone's about to die, and somehow that's more sensational.
And you were 3?
I was 2 months away from being 3.
So over the last 3 decades, you've been through this more than once. He's gotten more than one date, and the last one, he was within an hour of being executed. What kind of things are you seeing in the media, especially the last date and this one?
Well, mostly I try to avoid it. I think that I've always been a little bit angry or a little bit upset about what happened, but my family has reacted in a completely different way. They are just absolutely 100% hate my dad, don't want to hear anything about him, don't want... growing up, I couldn't even ask questions about, my dad or my mom or anything like that, because it hurt them. And every single time they schedule one of these execution dates, it just reopens all of that. And for them, I think they see it as finally getting justice, or him finally getting what he deserves. But for me, it just seems like, my past is getting drug up for no reason, If there's no purpose to it, then, what was it really for,
Mm. Where were you when they died?
Honestly, I'm not really sure. I've had different family members tell me different things. For the longest time, I thought I was there. And I think whenever I was a teenager, my granddad told me that I was with my dad's parents whenever it happened. Obviously, I don't remember, but for some reason, I mean, even after they told me that, like, I always thought that I was there. I always thought that I was there. I mean, I can't picture it. I can't remember anything about it, but it just, every time they told me, it didn't sound right. It didn't feel right. But I think the storyline says that my dad left me with his parents and was supposed to be meeting up with my mom to buy her a car. They had split up, and she was supporting me, my twin brother, and my 2 half-brothers. And they were 13 and 16. Me and my twin brother were 2. She was working at Waffle House, supporting all 4 of us. And she was struggling financially. She needed help. She reached out to him, and he took advantage of it. My mom's sister, Terry, is, and always has been, I guess, her best friend. My mom was like her role model, idol, big sister, you know? And most of the things that I know about my mom, that's who I learned from. Even whenever I was in group homes growing up, she used to come get me out, and she was the only person that would really just give me an honest answer as to what kind of person my mom was, you know? Like, she wouldn't try to sugarcoat it or try to make her sound like some kind of angel or anything, but she would actually give me a glimpse into the personality that my mom had.
What kind of things did you hear?
that my mom was really mean. She apparently she was really protective over my uncles, and I guess sometimes she could be a little bit of a bully because they act like they're terrified of her. But they also said that she was really loyal, really trustworthy. That she I don't want to say a tomboy, but she wasn't like, you know, girly, you know? Like, she was always just a little tougher than, I guess, our brothers at least. But,
So with your aunt and uncles, when you said that your family's really split about your dad's execution, that's kind of who you're talking about when you say they're really all for it. They want to see it happen.
Well, obviously my dad's side, growing up, they always maintained his innocence. They said that he didn't have anything to do with it. They said that my family basically, I say my family because that's who I grew up with, but my mom's family basically pointed the police in that direction, accused him, coerced the police into basically just going on a manhunt. Everything that I've learned about the whole situation, I've basically learned off of reading stuff on the internet. Here lately, for the first time in my life, I saw a picture of my mom as a kid on the internet.
Whoa.
All I did was Google her name, and it popped up. I thought that was cool.
So it felt good to see her young.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've only got like maybe 5, 6 pictures that I've ever seen in my whole life, and I don't own any of them. I don't even have any pictures of myself whenever I was a kid, anything. Man, stuff like that is huge with me. Getting to hear about my mom whenever she was a kid, getting to hear about some of the things that I did whenever I was a kid and she was still alive.
What have you heard what you were like when you were a teeny?
I was definitely a handful. I was hyper. I was always into everything. They had to put a fence over the top of my crib to keep me from crawling out. Somehow I was on the second floor of our house, and I managed to crawl out of my crib, out of the window, out onto the carport, and to the very edge, and was waving at everybody while they were having a cookout when I was supposed to be up taking a nap at this had to be 6 months before this happened. And I saw a video of whenever my mom was still alive. They were having another cookout, and I had taken off running just for no obvious reason towards the street, out of nowhere. And before anyone could do anything, my mom took off after me and football tackled me before I could hit the main road.
That's that tomboy coming out.
Yeah. In the video, you see everything. I mean, she took me out.
When did you first hear what happened to your mom?
Immediately. I mean, like, by the time I was 6, I had already seen videos of my mom being carried out on a stretcher. I had already been to psychiatrists and psychologists. I had already been told I needed medication, that I was ADHD, that I had PTSD, that I grew up quick. I don't want to say I matured quick because that's still a work in progress, but I definitely understood concepts that most kids that age don't. I knew that my dad was in prison. I knew that he had killed my mom. My family had me convinced that my dad was going to break out of prison and come kill all of us. And I mean, by 7 years old, I had this habit of like making these forts, these clubhouses, I guess. That's what I used to call them. But I would find a patch of trees and I would just like fortify it with like stuff out of Home Alone movies, you know?
Yeah.
Like I had a whole trench cut out. I had tripwires.
Booby traps.
Yeah, all over the place. Because, I mean, in my mind, I honestly thought that, you know, it was as simple as my dad just walking out of a gate or something. You know, I never knew what a prison looked like. I was taken to go see him whenever I was really little. And it's one of the things that made my mom's family really push to have my granny and papa's rights taken away.
Because they took you?
Yeah, and I barely remember the visit. I don't even think he was in prison yet. I think he was still in county jail. I mean, I was really young, and I can't even put it in a time context of like who I was living with or anything. I just remember going and seeing him through glass and him saying, I didn't do it. And whenever, I blacked out. I don't remember anything else. I remember telling my grandparents that I felt like I could have broken down the walls to get out. And I was itty bitty, so I couldn't have broken a crib. But this whole back and forth between my mom's family and my dad's family. Whenever I was with my dad's family, you know, they pampered us. You know, they wanted us to feel like we were welcome there. And obviously they wanted that connection to their son, who they were probably never going to see again. My mom's family was pretty much the same way, but on the flip side, there was the other side where my dad's family saw that, you know, I was my mom's kid, and my mom's family definitely reminded me that I was my dad's kid, saying that if I didn't act right or do this or behave this way, that eventually I'd wind up where my dad was.
Did you think that was true?
No, because I hated my dad. I absolutely hated everything about him. If I found out he liked a certain type of music, I wouldn't listen to it. If I found out that he liked a certain color, I hated it. I absolutely didn't think I was going to wind up being like him. If anything, I thought I was going to do everything in my power to be the exact opposite. There was no aspect of my dad that I absolutely did not 100% despise. A lot of people get hung up on, you know, the relationship that a mother has with a kid and think that a lot of the pain and anger that I feel is because of that. But the fact is, I've never had that. I don't miss that relationship because I've never had one. What I do miss is the opportunity that was taken away to have one. I see what other kids have. I see what other grown men have. I see Christmases and Thanksgivings and all these things that I've never gotten to experience from a perspective that most people grow up and take for granted. So my granddad started this thing about giving me an allowance whenever I was like 8 or 9. And back then, you know, money was a little different. So he would give me like $2 a week. And eventually it got to where all I wanted was a comic book. But the condition was I had to be good all week to get it. So every day anytime I got in the car with my granddad, I'd be like, was I good today? I always felt like I had to earn wherever I was staying. Like, seriously. Whenever I asked him if I was, being good, it wasn't just because I wanted an allowance, it's because I didn't want to get kicked out again, Me and my brother reacted very differently to what happened. He very much turned inward, and I very much was the same way I've always been since I was a kid, I guess. I mean, I was hyper. I tried very hard to get attention, to please people, to belong, I guess. And because my brother was so quiet, antisocial, didn't have any friends, didn't really communicate well, I was super overprotective. It got to a point where even before we got separated, we couldn't go to the same school because if someone said something to him,
You take him down.
Yeah, pretty much. I got in fights at church, at school, at the Boys and Girls Club, on the walks home, in the neighborhood. Literally just about anywhere and everywhere we went. Because if I caught a kid pointing at him or calling him names or saying anything to him, I never even said anything. I would just come out of left field swinging. And my granddad being a missionary, stuff like that was really bad anyways. It all added up to my granddad just saying, look, he couldn't handle it. And by the time I was 12, and he decided to keep my twin brother and drop me off at a group home. He didn't just up and decide to go drop me off. He told me he was going to for a while, and it was just hanging over my head. So naturally, my behavior just got worse and worse and worse. I was convinced that if this is what he was going to do, this is what I was going to do. And even at that young age, I was really good at it. I'm not proud of this. My granddad kept telling me he was going to go drop me off. He's going to drop me off. So before I went to school, I punched myself in the eye like 4 or 5 times. Wow. I went in, held my head down, and acted like I was all, looking back, it was a pretty convincing act, But
to try to kind of frame him for
yes,
stuff, yeah.
That's exactly what I did. I told him that he hit me, but all they did was call him and let him come pat on me, so it didn't work out. But, I got tired of people telling me that I was like my dad, that I was going to be like my dad, that I was anything like my dad. So, the more I heard it, the more I would act out. And the more I acted out, the more aggravated and basically helpless my granddad felt,
You said that you've been at times as mad at your grandfather as you were your dad. And
yeah,
why?
Definitely, because my dad did what he did because of whatever motive, whatever feelings he had towards my mom. It wasn't intentionally towards me, What my granddad did was very much separate me from the only immediate family I had, my twin brother. I bounced all over the state. I could probably name off at least 8 different cities I lived in 4 years. And during all that time, my granddad would come pick me up maybe one weekend every few months. My aunt would come get me out for maybe a 48-hour pass. But every single time, they would take me right back, And the whole time, all I'm thinking to myself is that, what's wrong with me that these people come get me just so they can come drop me off again? Not because of something I'm doing or something I've done, but just because of who my dad is and what he did, Because ultimately, that's what this all falls back on. It wasn't that I deserved to be here. If they were younger, never would have been there. If I had a real mom and dad, never would have gone there. If they didn't think that somehow my behavior was going to escalate because of who my biological father was, I never would have been there. And having to understand and cope with and acknowledge all of this at such a young age, I wasn't able to do it with the responsibility or maturity that I can now. I couldn't evaluate, my behavior versus their capability. I couldn't look at their financial situation and say that this was a factor. I couldn't say that their stress was a factor, that, their grieving was a factor. I couldn't do any of that because at that point, I mean, a kid is selfish. A kid is always going to think about, I hurt, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, these things.
What would have helped you between the ages of 3 and 18?
I would have needed someone that wasn't going to give up every time I did something wrong. Someone that was going to be a stable, supporting factor in my life. Wouldn't have mattered how that took on a shape or form. It could have been a mentor, a counselor, or anything, but someone that wasn't going to call DCS and have me transferred the first time that they felt like I was too much.
And then at 18, what happens? We need to take one more break, and when we come back, we'll continue my interview with Casey Smith, son of death row inmate Oscar Franklin Smith. He'll tell us how he's still processing his mother and brother's murders, about his own years of incarceration, and what hopes he has for the future. Stay tuned. I'm Tasha A.F. Lemley, and this is Nashville.
I'm Nina Cardona, and this is Nashville. Today, Tennessee resumed executing death row inmates. Execution had been on hold since 2022 due to concerns about lethal injection protocols. Oscar Smith was pronounced dead at 10:47 this morning after a lethal injection. Now let's go back to This Is Nashville managing editor Tasha A.F. Lemley's interview last week with Casey Smith, the son of Oscar Franklin Smith.
And then at 18, what happens?
I was a really bitter little turd whenever I turned 18. And leading up to it, I had been around juvenile delinquents, not abandoned, helpless, happy-go-lucky, trying to please people, kids, but angry, bitter, rebellious, and very much criminal kids. So I literally wrote out on a napkin, I, Casey Smith, do hereby sign myself out of state's custody, handed it to him, and walked out at midnight. Whenever I turned 18, I inherited half of my mom's life insurance. The policy, I think, was like $50,000. My mom's parents had spent, I think, 10 of it or close to it on little things, whenever they were raising us. But for the most part, they left it untouched. And me and my brother both got about $23,000. And I blew through it in a month. I bought a 99 Spider Eclipse GST. Back then, I felt like I was in Fast and Furious. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah, you made it, yeah.
I had my own place. I had a job working at Sam's Club. I had a convertible Eclipse. I thought I was just, really doing it. I had a sound system in my car. I had a remote starter, which was huge back in 2005. I had a cell phone. That was big. Like back then, a flip phone was like the coolest thing ever. And my brother, I went to go see him, and he saw everything I had, everything I was doing, and he wanted out of state custody too. So I let him come move in with me. And I told you I was a really bad person. Like, I was a really bad guy. We had been separated for so long that I didn't really see him the same way that I did whenever we were kids. Whenever I ran out of my money, I blew his. And then whenever me and him started arguing, I just said screw it and left him. And I would definitely say that I was a bad person at one point. But never did it cross my mind that I was anything like my dad. Never did I ever, as an adult, say, hey, look, this is what your dad would have done. A, I don't know what my dad would have done. And B, people make mistakes. People react to situations differently. Some people have self-control, some people don't. Most of my mistakes or my illegal activities weren't on impulse. They were from that sense of wanting to belong. My friends were going to do this, and if I wanted to be, them to be loyal to me, I needed to be loyal to them. If me going and robbing this person meant that I was going to be able to get a hotel room for my friend for the night, then that's what we were going to do. If someone was threatening, someone that was close to me, then, we were going to get together and go handle it, because that's what it took for me to be loyal, for me to belong, for me to be able to fit in. If I didn't do that, then, who was I? These people took me in.
It's like you can keep earning your place.
Exactly. And I don't ever want to settle for just, having a place. I've been incarcerated 33 times. The last 2 times alone were 10 years. So that leaves 31 other times that I've been incarcerated and released. And every single time I've gotten a job whenever I got out. Every single time. And I've never settled for just getting a job. Like, whenever I get a job, I want to make sure that I'm already working towards the next pay raise, the next promotion, the next, whatever.
So over the last 20 years, you've been incarcerated more than 10 years.
Yeah. I've only been on the streets like 6 years since I was 12. Something like that. That could be low, could be high. I don't know. I've never actually sat down and done the math, but I don't have a lot of experience out here, like somehow, some way, shape or form, something always happens. I'm not trying to shift blame or anything.
No, yeah.
I definitely made all these decisions myself knowingly, but my priorities were different and my sense of right and wrong was different. Not because I didn't understand right and wrong. I just felt like everyone else didn't.
So you were in for 3 years most recently, and you've been out 2 months?
Yep.
What do you need?
It's little things that I can't even, I don't even know how to answer that, because, my whole life, it wasn't a point of what anyone else could give me that I needed. It was always more a point of what I needed to do to go about getting it. Whenever I first got out, I had the clothes on my back, that's it, nothing. And I've only been out 2 months, so I'm still wearing shoes someone gave me whenever I got out.
So I don't know you. But I do have to say that, talking to you, you have an underlying optimism that I don't understand. You have a sweetness about you that I don't understand where it came from, hearing all of this. And the last 20 years have been no better than the first 20. And here you are 8 weeks in to something new once again. I don't know if there's a question here somewhere. Maybe if I just keep talking, a question will come.
Well, you'd be surprised what you can do whenever you don't have a choice. And my choices were always limited at best. It comes to a point where you have to either decide to be your own person and have your own set of values, or just not care about anything. And for the most part, the sweetness that you're talking about, or the niceness, or the responsible person that you see, is a product of the guilt of all the bad things that I did over the years that led to getting to this point. I need people to see me as me. And the fact is that my mom is a huge factor in that too, because not a lot of people can say that they don't have a single bad memory about their mom. The fact is I don't have any, but I don't have any bad ones either. My mom is, everything I ever wanted, because she was never anything that I didn't. I can picture her as being, perfect, despite some of the stories I've heard. And, I can be proud to be her son, and to have people tell me that I look like her, that I act like her. And I can hang on to that just as much as I fight against the people that say I look just like my dad, or I act just like my dad. Most people couldn't sit here and say, look, he gutted one of my brothers, he stabbed my other brother 20-something times with an ice pick, or he cut my mom's throat, and in the same sentence say that, they forgive him, or that they're really not that upset about it, or that,
So since you were 3, You had seen your dad kind of early, around 4 or so. Have you ever been back to see him?
No. I've written him once. And he was very, very quick in his response to say that he didn't need my forgiveness. He didn't. The only thing he was guilty of, and this is literally word for word what he wrote me. I have a pretty good memory, and it's something that really got on my nerves, so stuck in my head for a while. But he said the only thing he was guilty of is loving my mom, and that the DA framed him and planted evidence, and that the prosecution basically just stacked the odds against him. He didn't have a chance. He said if I didn't want to write him as his son, not to write him at all. And I did just that. Never wrote him again.
When did you write him that time?
Whenever I was sitting in county jail, and in the Bible it says that you can't be forgiven unless you forgive others. And at the time I took that really seriously because I needed a lot of forgiveness. I wrote him, and I basically told him the same thing I'm telling you, how I grew up. I gave him a few examples of the flaws in my personality, the way I think, the circumstances that I find in everyday life that most people don't, the handicaps that I have that other people don't. And I told him, I was like, it's very much your fault. It's very much because of something you did. And I'm still paying for your mistake, But he didn't seem to care. Personally, I believe that it's his coping mechanism, In my mind, he sits in there, tells himself that he didn't do it, and maybe in his mind he thinks that, she made him do it, or there's some rationalization there that allows him to escape guilt. But I have no desire to talk to someone that can't even acknowledge that, I've got kids now, and if I went 20 years without talking to either one of them, and they wrote me out of the blue, I wouldn't care if I wouldn't care what they said. Literally, nothing in that letter would matter short of they were willing to continue corresponding with me, And the fact that he didn't have that immediate response just tells me everything I need to know about him. That a lot of the things I've heard growing up were true. They had to be. Because if you can't even care enough about your own kid who you literally killed people for, because the storyline that I was given was that he thought that by doing this, he would get custody of me and my twin brother. He was super possessive. He was super controlling. He thought that them being out of the picture would cause custody to revert back to him. And, if we were that important to you, then you would think, after all this time, that it would be like the high point of your life, that your kids are reaching out to you, or your kid. I sent him pictures and everything. You know how many pictures I got the whole last time I was in prison? None from anybody.
Yeah.
The only person that wrote me was the IRS. That's ridiculous. My dad didn't rob me of a life. I allowed my emotions to keep me from moving past it.
What do you think's going to happen Thursday?
Honestly, I think they're just going to reschedule it. If they do go through with it, I don't know that I'll get anything beneficial from it. I don't know that I'll feel any different, but I think that what's going to happen is, for some reason or another, they're going to find a reason to put it off again. That when they do put it off again, they're going to cite some technical reason, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen.
What do you hope for?
Yeah, that's a seriously loaded question, because I feel like I'm a bad person if I say they hope they do it. I feel like going there in no way, shape, or form would be good for anybody, because I don't feel like watching another person die is healthy for anybody. Having gone to prison, I've seen that. I've been around people that have died. I've been around people that have been killed. And I don't see how that could help anybody. I don't see how there's got to be a really articulate way of saying this that I'm just not thinking of. But if this man's killing 3 people is deserving of death, why would anybody think it of any benefit to go and watch the state do the same thing to him? I don't necessarily disagree with the death penalty, but the public spectacle of it, I think, defeats the entire purpose, because we're not punishing him to deter other people. We're punishing him for his actions, and making it a public event or talking about it in such a public manner actually lends fame to it.
How do you think you'll feel if he's gone?
For all intents and purposes, he's been gone since I was 2. I've never really considered him as a living, breathing father or a part of my family. Or whenever I quit blaming him for everything, he quit being a factor in my life completely. Whenever I forgave him, he quit being anything other than another human that needs prayer and help just as much as I do. I don't think that my thoughts towards him will change any. I don't think that, and I can't say that with certainty, because I might feel guilty after they do it. If they do it, I might feel upset. I spent so much of my life hating him and hating everything about him that it's easy for me to gas myself up and say, hey, look, he's a scumbag. He deserves it. He killed a good woman and 2 kids. I hope that he really has found forgiveness. I really hope that in his mind, loving my mom was real for him, because maybe then it'll lead him to a point where he can admit some form of guilt. I don't see that he'll ever be able to do that if he doesn't actually care about someone other than himself. I can't say that I know one way or another how he feels, but I really do hope and pray that he can get the forgiveness that I've gotten. I don't deserve a lot of the things that I have or that I'm getting right now, but I'm blessed nonetheless. I work hard and I live the way I think that I'm supposed to. And I feel like if he's been doing the same thing all these years, that, there's a chance and a hope that he's not the same person that did these things.
Where do you think you'll be at 10 a.m.?
Probably at work, honestly. Hopefully.
Well, Casey Smith, you're the son of Judy Roberts and Oscar Franklin Smith. Thank you.
I appreciate you letting me talk about this.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced and directed by me, Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our board operator is Liv Lombardi. Special thanks to Carrera Brewington. Our theme music is by Larange and Namir Blade, and additional music courtesy of Moby Gratis. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or on your podcasting app of choice. And the conversation doesn't end here. You can leave us a message at 615-751-2500. You can also find us on Blue Sky and Instagram and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Tasha A.F. Lemley. We love you. Keep going.